Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today we are continuing with a brief pause from reading Two Roads to check out another primary source. So, yesterday we read Captain Pratt's speech about the Indian schools that he founded. Today we'll be reading the firsthand experience from a student who attended those schools. So, we will be reading Zita Lasa's Land of Red Apples to get more perspective into Seed Kalasa's point of view, how she felt, and her thoughts as she experienced that boarding school. So today's learning targets, you will be paraphrasing the key ideas and the perspective conveyed in Seed Kalasa's text, just like we did yesterday, restating those the main points that she is making in your own words. Next, you will be analyzing Seed Kalasa's point of view. So how does she feel about her experience at the boarding school, and how can you tell through her words, through her actions, through the thoughts that she's writing in her text? Finally, there will be a little bit of figurative language, so text that is not meant literally, that you all will kind of untangle its meaning and see what Zikalasa what she meant when she used certain figurative language. So today's attendance question, if you haven't answered already in the chat, go ahead and enter your favorite junk food. Once you have done that, you are free to open up the Nearpod for the Land of the Red Apples and go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about our author today. So Zika Lasa was an indigenous woman from the Lakota tribe in South Dakota. So she was sent to these Carlisle Indian School in around 1870, and she spent a few years there. So as we read her text from her book, American Indian Stories, pay attention to her point of view, how she's feeling about the experience, how she is processing the experience. So as we read the text, it is about 10 paragraphs long. So each paragraph will be on the slide like this with numbers next to it indicating the paragraph. And then your stop and jots will be at the top in blue. So I will not have you all annotate the text. I'll post the text online if you'd like to read it all in one place. But you will not be annotating like we did yesterday, just to save time. The text will be in these slides and then posted in full on Classroom as well. So let's begin with paragraph 1. There were 8 in our party of bronze children who were going east with the missionaries. Among us were 3 young braves, 2 tall girls, and we 3 little ones, Judean, Toan, and I. So quick vocab check for paragraph 1. Missionaries means people sent from churches or religious groups to foreign countries or foreign lands to teach and convert others to their religion. So you can see how in the boarding schools, they had an opportunity there to do their missionary work in a way that was supported by the boarding school, removing the culture, language, and indigenous religion of Native Americans. We had been very impatient to start on our journey to the Red Apple Country, which, we were told, lay a little beyond the great circular horizon of the western prairie. Under a sky of rosy apples, we dreamt of roaming as freely and happily as we had chased the cloud shadows on the Dakota plains. We had anticipated much pleasure from a ride on the iron horse, but the throngs of staring pale faces disturbed and troubled us. So stop and jot number 1, using the highlighted pieces of paragraph 2. What is Zika Lasa's point of view about this journey? So check out these highlighted portions. We had been very impatient to start on our journey to the Red Apple Country, which we were told lay a little beyond the great circular horizon of the western prairie. Under a sky of rosy apples, we dreamt of roaming as freely and happily as we chased the cloud shadows on the Dakota plains. We had anticipated much pleasure from a ride on the iron horse, but the throngs of staring pale faces disturbed and troubled us. So go ahead and fill in your stop and jot. What is her point of view about the journey? Great. So you should have filled in her point of view as curious, excited, anticipatory. She's anticipating this journey. She's excited. She had been impatient to start. Maybe she's anxious. She dreamt of roaming as freely and happily. So she envisions this open land where she can roam around and enjoy the land. And she had anticipated pleasure from a ride on the iron horse. But we will see if that comes through. Let's keep reading. So your second stop and jot is within paragraph 2. So using context clues, what do you think she means by iron horse? So think about the image of the iron horse and select your answer. If you selected train, you are correct. So if you think about the time in history when they were traveling across the country, the late 1800s, and you think about the number of people that she's with, it is a train car, part of a larger train, the iron being the metal that the train is made of, and the horse is how Zitkala-Sa understands it, as in her culture, horses were frequently used for transportation. So to have a metal horse, you could think of that like a train. All right, let's read paragraph 3. On the train, fair women with tottering babies on each arm stopped their haste and scrutinized the children of absent mothers. Large men with heavy bundles in their hands halted nearby and riveted their glassy blue eyes upon us. So using context clues, go ahead and select your answer. What do you think scrutinized means here? So scrutinize means to criticize or to kind of pick apart. So you can see from the context clues that the women carrying their babies may have criticized or looked down upon children without their mothers, so mothers that were not there, they're absent. And as we can tell from the description, fair women, we can tell that those are white women. So looking down upon children who are taken away from their mothers. And remember, we know that a lot of those children who were taken away weren't taken with their parents' permission. They were essentially kidnapped from their parents. So think about that word in the context of this sentence. They are criticizing these children who were taken away from their mothers. Let's keep reading paragraph 4. I sank deep into the corner of my seat, for I resented being watched. Directly in front of me, children who were no larger than I hung themselves upon the backs of their seats with their bold white faces toward me. Sometimes they took their forefingers out of their mouths and pointed at my moccasined feet. Their mothers, instead of reproving such rude curiosity, looked closely at me and attracted their children's further notice to my blanket. This embarrassed me and kept me constantly on the verge of tears. So again, look at this highlighted text in this paragraph. Go ahead and describe Zitkala-Sa's point of view. How is she feeling about the other children on the train, the other children and their mothers, the white children on the train? How is she feeling? What is her point of view? Great. So if you described that she is embarrassed, she feels targeted, or she feels humiliated or offended by their rudeness, all of those words would be correct for her point of view. She's feeling very isolated, so she doesn't feel like she has people around her to support her, but she also feels like the people around her are maybe mocking her, staring at her because she is different. She's wearing moccasins, so indigenous type of leather shoes with beads. And the mothers are not even telling their children not to stare. The mothers are encouraging it, really, with sending their children's notice to her blanket. So You can imagine how that would feel. She's constantly on the verge of tears. She's embarrassed. She's feeling as if the other children are mocking her. So you can imagine what it feels like to be in her position. All right, we're going to read a few more paragraphs, and then you will write a gist statement for the entire first 7 paragraphs. So think about what we just read, what we've learned about Zika Lassa and her experience on the train, and then add that to paragraphs 5, 6, and 7, and you'll write a quick gist statement. I sat perfectly still with my eyes downcast, daring only now and then to shoot long glances around me. Chancing to turn to the window at my side, I was quite breathless upon seeing one familiar object. It was the telegraph pole which strode by at short paces, very near my mother's dwelling, along the edge of a road thickly bordered with wild sunflowers. Some poles like these had been planted by white men. Often I had stopped on my way down the road to hold my ear against the pole, and, hearing its low moaning, I used to wonder what the paleface had done to hurt it. Now I sat watching for each pole that glided by to be the last one. In this way, I had forgotten my uncomfortable surroundings when I heard one of my comrades call out my name. I saw the missionary standing very near, tossing candies and gums into our midst. This amused us all, and we tried to see who could catch the most of the sweetmeats. Though we rode several days inside the Iron Horse, I do not recall a single thing about our luncheons. So go ahead and take stop and jot number 6. What is the gist of the text we've read so far? What has happened in paragraphs 1 through 7? I'll go back and show you earlier paragraphs to jog your memory. Go ahead and jot down your gist statement for what we've learned about her journey so far. All right, let's keep reading. It was night when we reached the school grounds. The lights from the windows of the large buildings fell upon some of the icicled trees that stood beneath them. We were led toward an open door where the brightness of the lights within flooded out over the heads of the excited palefaces who blocked the way. My body trembled more from fear than from the snow I trod upon. So stop and jot number 7. We're thinking about her point of view, Zika Lassa's point of view, but also thinking about the difference between her point of view and the point of view of the white children who are arriving to the school with her. So here in this paragraph and throughout the text, you might see pale faces to describe whiter children with their lighter skin. Think about how she's describing how they are feeling in this highlighted text versus how she is feeling. How is her point of view different, and why might it be different? Great. So now that you've jotted down your point of view, you may have written about how Zika Lassa is an indigenous girl, so she is afraid to be in this new culture, people that do not look like her. She is away from her parents, versus a lot of the white children had their parents with them. So white children might be more excited to be in this new place because they have their parents with them. The school teachers and missionaries might look like them as white people, speak the same language, versus Zika Lassa is an indigenous woman, young girl. A lot of people do not look like her. It's a foreign place. She's in a train for the first time. Those are all things that would make her point of view different. All right, let's finish up the text. So paragraph 9, entering the house, I stood close against the wall. The strong, glaring light in the large, whitewashed room dazzled my eyes. The noisy hurrying of hard shoes upon a bare wooden floor increased the whirring in my ears. My only safety seemed to be in keeping next to the wall. As I was wondering in which direction to escape from all this confusion, two warm hands grasped me firmly, and in the same moment I was tossed high in midair. A rosy-cheeked, pale-faced woman caught me in her arms. I was both frightened and insulted by such trifling. I stared into her eyes, wishing her to let me stand on my own feet, but she jumped me up and down with increasing enthusiasm. My mother had never made a plaything of her wee daughter. Remembering this, I began to cry aloud. They misunderstood the cause of my tears and placed me at a white table loaded with food. There our party were united again. As I did not hush my crying, one of the older ones whispered to me, "Wait until you are alone in the night." So again, we're thinking about her point of view, how she feels about being picked up and thrown in the air. How does that one experience of being picked up and thrown in the air, how does that show her point of view about arriving at the school? Great. So you should have selected your answer about how when she's tossed in the air, she feels out of her element. She feels like it's something new for her, something scary and unknown. She said that her mother had never done that with her. So it's a cultural difference here that the white missionary woman thought that that was okay for her to do. So Zikalasa is offended. She's irritated. She's annoyed. She's frightened and she feels insulted. She feels like somebody offended her. Just like when she is in this new place, it is alarming to her. It is scary for her to be experiencing this new culture and to be taken away from her family with force. So that little experience of being picked up and thrown into the air is kind of like a metaphor for how she is feeling about her journey to this new school. All right, last paragraphs. Number 11, it was very little I could swallow beside my sobs that evening. Oh, but I wanted my mother and brother Dawi. I want to go to my aunt, I pleaded, but the ears of the pale faces could not hear me. So in these two highlighted descriptions, it was very little I could swallow beside my sobs, and the ears of the pale faces could not hear me. Are those figurative language or literal language? So does she mean literally that she couldn't swallow anything besides her sobs? Does she mean literally that the ears could not hear her? Or is that figurative language? Great, so you should have selected figurative language. She is figuratively describing how upset she is and how she imagines that the ears could not hear her because they did not respond. All right, so last couple of paragraphs. From the table, we were taken along an upward incline of wooden boxes, which I learned afterward to call a stairway. At the top was a quiet hall, dimly lighted. Many narrow beds were in one straight line down the entire length of the hall. In them lay sleeping brown faces, which peeped just out of the coverings. I was tucked into bed with one of the tall girls because she talked to me in my mother tongue and seemed to soothe me. I had arrived in the wonderful land of rosy skies, but I was not happy, as I had thought I should be. My long travel and the bewildering sights had exhausted me. I fell asleep, heaving deep, tired sobs. My tears were left to dry themselves in streaks because neither my aunt nor my mother was near to wipe them away. So how does this highlighted section at the end of the text show Zikalasa's point of view of arriving to the school? My tears were left to dry themselves in streaks because neither my aunt nor my mother was near to wipe them away. Great, so you may have described how Zikalasa is feeling alone, how she is afraid, she's away from her family, and she feels abandoned. She feels like she has to fend for herself on this journey without her mother, her aunt, her family around her to support her. Okay, so now that we've read the text and given it a close read, looking out for her point of view, we are going to work through the same point of view chart that we used yesterday with Captain Pratt, except that today you will be working with Zikalasa's text, and then you will be comparing her point of view to that which we saw from Captain Pratt yesterday. So first, you're going to paraphrase the excerpt by filling in the key ideas. So what were the main points that Zikalasa was making? What did she mention about her journey to the school and when she arrived? And how is she feeling? Go ahead and take a moment to pause this video and fill that in. So next, you're going to fill in Zikalasa's point of view. How does she feel about the boarding schools? So you can use any of the examples that we went through in the text about being thrown into the air, her experience on the train with the white mothers and children, her experience crying out and not having anyone help her. How does she feel about the boarding schools? Next, go ahead and fill in text evidence that shows that point of view. So what words did she use in the text, or what descriptions did she use about her experience to show her point of view? Go ahead and fill that into your ASYNC work. Finally, you're going to compare and contrast her point of view to Captain Pratt that we read yesterday. So yesterday you annotated with Cami Captain Pratt's point of view as the founder of the school. How are they alike and different? So take a few moments to fill that in at the bottom of your chart. Very different perspectives as a white older man who founded this school versus a young Indigenous girl who is attending. Think about how they are alike and how they are different. Once you have finished your ASYNC work, make sure that you have clicked Turn In on Classroom if you've finished Monday through Thursday. Remember that tomorrow on Friday we will have a flex day. So if you have any work that you need to finish, you can hold off on turning it in just yet, and then tomorrow you will be placed into a breakout room depending on what you need to finish in your ASYNC work. Again, let me know in the chat if you have any questions. If you finished all of your ASYNC for the week, go ahead and click Turn In.